Today we'll be discussing the case of the sacred chicken killer. And no, this isn't a joke. The Romans were deadly serious when it came to their superstitions and were absolutely ready to severely punish those who broke such taboos. Augury in particular played a key role in much of their decision making, with these bird readings informing decisions as minor as when to plant your crops and as major as whether to fight a battle which could ultimately decide the fate of a war. So yeah, when one Roman decided to kill these sacred chickens, the people understandably lost their minds. I spend a lot of time reading history books to make these documentaries, yet I still find myself with a growing list of titles I just don't have time to get to. I'm sure in your own busy life it can be tough to find the time to explore as many books as you'd like. Thankfully, our sponsor Blinkist has a solution. Blinkist is an app that takes thousands of non-fiction books and uses experts to distill them down to the most essential ideas for you to easily digest with text or audio in just 15 minutes. This can be super helpful for engaging with subjects you'd never otherwise get to, or for making a short list of the books you definitely want to read in full. As an example, I've finally been able to delve into Stephen Levitt's Freakonomics, Yuval Harari's Sapiens, and Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. It's honestly been extremely liberating and a huge breath of fresh air for my ever-curious mind. You can check it out right now by clicking the link in the description below to get a 7-day free trial. In addition, the first 100 people will get 25% off a full membership. So check it out. Before we jump into the main story of this episode, I did want to set the stage by talking about Roman augury. Simply put, augury is just a type of omen reading involving the behavior of birds. It's a quite ancient practice that goes back many centuries. In the Iliad, for example, Homer writes of an incident where an eagle is spotted clutching a serpent, but rather than being defeated, the snake bites its would-be captor and breaks loose, falling amidst the Trojans and causing chaos. This ominous event was taken as a sign from Zeus of a looming Trojan defeat. Another famous incident is actually tied to the legendary founding of Rome. Apparently, when Romulus and Remus were choosing a site for the new city, they each argued for their respective hills based on the birds they observed. Remus saw 6 birds appear first, while Romulus saw a total of 12. Each claimed divine favor, citing either the primacy of order or the primacy of number. Thus we see that augury was used as a means to decipher the will of the gods, but that much of the art in this practice came in the interpretation. Early on, Roman society took a great interest in the reading of these bird signs. Tasked with this official duty were officials known as augurs. So who were they? Well, at first they were a small group of mystical priests. During the monarchy, they were limited to just a handful of patrician members. Over time though, this number was gradually increased and the position opened up to the plebeians. But what would they do? Well, they interpreted signs from the gods in 2 broad categories: oblative signs, which came unsolicited, and impetrative signs, which were requested. Augurs would keep a general eye out for the oblative signs, or be asked to make sense of some dramatic, unexpected event which was reported to them. The impetrative signs would be baked into the daily routines of Roman society and were required for a huge variety of events. This included things like elections, the passing of laws, and military campaigning. But what were these signs? Well, there were all kinds. One of the main categories was the movement and sound of birds. Here the augur might watch for the migration or movement of birds like eagles and vultures. Alternatively, they might listen to the song or call patterns of specific animals like ravens, owls, and crows. Various factors had to be considered, like the nuances of the circumstance, the time of day, and the period of the year. In these deliberations, the augurs actually took many notes and could refer to books filled with past records for insight on the correct interpretation. Another main category of signs was the behavior of birds eating. Basically, the augur would feed them and judge their reactions. Did they refuse to eat, feast ravenously, or behave in other particular ways? Eventually, it appears that the bird of choice for this form of augury came to be the chicken. These holy animals were supposedly sourced from an island in Greece and kept in special cages. They would be brought with an army on campaign, along with handlers and an official augur. When it came time to move out or wage battle, the sacred chickens would be consulted for approval on particular actions by the army. So when you saw a Roman general bust out the chickens, you knew they meant business. A particularly interesting anecdote about this takes place when the Roman army was campaigning against the Samnites. On the eve of a massive battle, the consul called for the omens to be checked. Apparently, the sacred chickens refused to eat, but rather than report this ill sign, the augur instead lied and reported that they had feasted greedily. The battle thus began with high hopes of divine favor. However, rumors began to spread that the augur had lied and that the fight was a doomed affair. To quell this panic, the Roman general ordered the augur into the front lines. If he was indeed telling the truth, then surely he had nothing to fear. In short order though, the augur waded into combat, only to be struck down by a javelin. He had lied. However, in this moment, the gods were seen as having taken their vengeance, and the army would be spared as a result. This was apparently confirmed by the observation of a cawing crow and the arrival of friendly cavalry which turned the tide of battle. Clearly, the sacred birds were a matter of life and death. This now brings us to the main story of this episode. It's the middle of the First Punic War, and Rome and Carthage have been locked in a 15-year tug-of-war for control of Sicily. Combat on land has gained little traction, and the real fight has now moved into a titanic struggle for control of the seas. Hundreds of ships have already been lost in battle or storms, but a new wave of violence is brewing. In 249 BC, the Roman fleet, led by Publius Claudius Pulcher, launched an attack on the harbor of Drepana. As was tradition, the omens would be consulted. However, so far from shore, there were few birds in flight to read. Claudius therefore ordered the sacred chickens to be brought forth. On the deck of the flagship, the priests set up the boxed coop, while the High Admiralty looked on with bated breath. The augurs scattered food before the cage, and the doors were opened. Yet in the rocking of the waves, the only motion lay in the rolling grain. The chickens refused to leave their coop. This was a terrible omen that must have shocked all who witnessed it. Battle must be avoided at all costs. The chickens had spoken. But Claudius would not let them have the final say. His political career was on the line after all, and he wouldn't let some seasick fowl get in the way of his rightful glory. The consul grew furious and bellowed with rage. If they won't eat, let them drink. And with that, he threw the sacred chickens into the sea. Given the superstition of the Romans, this must have been an even more shocking sight. Their commander had basically just spit in the faces of the gods. This wouldn't end well. Indeed, right from the start, things began to fall apart. The Roman fleet's night approach had gotten hopelessly lost, leaving it strung out along the coastline. To make matters worse, the Carthaginian fleet that had intended to catch sleeping in the harbor was actually wide awake and currently sailing out to sea. What followed was a tactical debacle where the smaller Punic navy managed to pin the Romans up against the shore, cutting off their path of retreat and methodically ramming them to pieces. In all, Rome lost 20,000 men and 93 of their 120 ships. It was a colossal disaster, with Consul Claudius just barely making it out alive in a desperate breakout maneuver. On his return to Rome, Claudius Pulcher was almost immediately dragged to court and tried for capital crimes. As we discussed in our previous video on the Roman court system, this involved a trial held before the entire citizen body of Rome. Each day, a presiding magistrate would lead the inquiry into the matter, with the people sitting in judgment, often loudly making their opinions known. The mood of Rome must have already been tense given the strains of war, and this case must have brought the level of discontent to a fever pitch. After all, the sacred chicken killer had shown a monumental disrespect for religion and law which threatened to bring the wrath of the gods down on everyone. It should have been a clear-cut verdict given the nature of the case. Normally, how things went was that at the end of each day, the presiding magistrate would suggest a punishment and ask the defendant how they pled. If after 3 days they continued to plead not guilty, the matter would be put to a vote before the people. However, in this case, a torrential storm broke out over the city on the final day. The forum was literally flooding, and the trial was cut short without the proper adjourning steps. Claudius leapt at the chance and exploited this loophole to have the entire trial cancelled. The people were beyond outrage and dragged Claudius back to trial. However, they faced an issue in the form of Rome's double jeopardy rules, which prevented someone from being tried repeatedly for the same matter. Ultimately, this roadblock was overcome with arguments that double jeopardy only applied if Claudius was being tried in the exact same way for the same crime. Thus, the lucky Claudius could not be charged with capital or corporal punishment. Instead, he was given an enormous fine for killing the sacred chickens. This amounted to 1,000 asses for each ship lost, a total of 120,000 in all. Such a sum would have crushed any normal citizen. Luckily, however, the Claudii were one of the wealthiest families in Rome, and such a fine, while injurious, was hardly devastating. As a final addendum to this story, I did want to mention another case of abhorrent family values in the Claudii. Apparently, 3 years after the killing of the sacred chickens and the naval disaster which followed, Claudius's sister was attending a play. Upon leaving the theater, she grew irritated at the tightly packed crowds bumping her and loudly proclaimed that she wished her brother could have again wiped out the rabble with another battle. The statement stunned the onlookers. A new mob immediately formed, using the incident as a rallying cry to finally punish the Claudii for good. The will of the people here was impossible to ignore. Resentment still simmered that Claudius had gotten off too easily. As a result, she was also hauled into court and tried. However, her charge was an entirely new one, that of Maestas Minuta, or having diminished the majesty of the Roman people. This charge, often simply referred to as Maestas, became a new byword in Roman legal proceedings, generally translated to treason. So next time you see anyone messing with the sacred chickens, you know the consequences. I hope you've enjoyed this case study in Roman superstition and court practice. Stay tuned for more episodes in our series on law and order. A huge thanks again to all of our patrons who fund the channel, as well as the researchers, writers, and artists who made this video possible. See you in the next one.